everybody. Welcome back to Harnessing Your Wealth. Hey, this is part 2 of our discussion on divorce and divorce planning. Now, this isn't a topic that everyone is going to want to listen to. We understand that. However, as we mentioned in the last episode, nearly half of all marriages end in divorce. It's an unfortunate and actually a terrible statistic. We don't like it, but we want to talk about it because it does apply to so many people out there. And one thing that both Shaun and I did years ago in our careers is actually become designated or certified in divorce financial planning. There's actually a certification for folks who want to understand all the nuances of helping people navigate divorce from a financial standpoint, because I believe that's where most people make the biggest mistakes. Think about it. Divorce is probably the largest financial transaction someone will ever make.
Agreed.
And without the correct advice or without the knowledge of knowing where you're going and knowing what to look for, you could end up in a much worse place than you otherwise could have. So we want to kind of follow on from last time when we had our resident expert. We call her resident because we worked with her a number of times. That was Noni Ferguson. She is, from the legal standpoint, helping us understand all of the different terminology and the different types of divorce and maybe some strategies of how to negotiate the proper settlement. We're going to talk about the financial end and what we engage in quite often with people. So if you are someone who is either considering a divorce or actually now entering a divorce, potentially have a friend or a family member who is going through the same, this episode will appeal to you or apply to you. And we encourage you to listen to it, like it, share it, comment on it, let us know what you think. We're going to give you a series of steps, of what we call action items, of what you need to be doing to prepare for the most appropriate, most beneficial settlement. And then we're going to kind of share some case studies with some actual cases that we've worked. And we've worked hundreds of these cases in the time we've been doing this. We help only a certain niche type of client, let's say. So we don't want just everyone calling us because we have a certain type of a client and a criteria. Typically, we're about $3 million in net worth minimum. The more complex the estate, the more assets that are involved or businesses, the more appropriate, the better we are actually able to help.
The more complicated the situation, I would say we can add the most value.
That's where people really find us to shine. And I will say this, we find that we can actually, I don't want to sound biased, but we find that we can add a lot more value than the folks that just choose the route of contested divorce and hire attorneys. Because attorneys are good for certain things, but hey, they're not trained in the financial part.
Right.
And I would argue the financial part for the long term is going to be more important than just getting your settlement.
Yeah, you don't want to just go in there and just settle or fight for the wrong things. It's important to have a CDFA like us to help educate you, map out different divorce scenarios, and then also have some hard conversations with you where, hey, this asset doesn't make sense for you based on me knowing your financial situation. Or what if we did this? What if we got creative with dividing this asset, whatever it might be? And hey, I just saved you $50,000 in taxes. Would you like that approach? And most people are like, yeah. Where we've both been in cases, or maybe have had cases brought to us where they sat down in a mediation and attorneys got out a Excel spreadsheet or a notepad and they just split things right down the middle and didn't consider anything else other than, hey, it's equal on paper.
Yeah.
I would say 90+% of the time, there's mistakes made there. They didn't even consider.
More common than not
for
that to be the most inappropriate way to reach your settlement. Certain assets are appropriate for different parties, and we have to consider who is the most appropriate person to receive different assets. We always like to keep individual IRAs with the party who owns them. Dividing IRAs and dividing retirement plans are tricky. Now, they can be done, but sometimes you have to deal with more legal work. So Quadros, you'll hear that term quite a bit. It's a analogy is QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order. And that's something that needs to be dealt with occasionally. Now, we find ways to avoid that wherever possible, save you in legal expenses. So the home, who's going to receive the home? How is that going to be divided? Is it going to be shared? Can the other party go out and find a loan, for example?
In most homes, that's a big one that we're running into. And then we'll get into these steps, but just everyone's locked in these low rates, and now you're getting divorced, and no one wants to lose that low rate, but you're both on the loan. Can one party assume the loan? Will the mortgage company let that happen? Or is it a joint ownership situation? Or are we selling it? And are there any tax consequences with that? How do we divide the dollars after? So the home's a big one right now, because that's oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes one of the larger assets that couples are dealing with.
And also maybe the asset that has the most emotional underpinnings.
Tie. Raised a family there, maybe inherited the home from mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, whatever it might be. And there's like that tie there that sometimes has unfortunately got to be broken because it just doesn't make sense to keep it. But what are these steps, Bill? Let's dive into this, or action items. We like to refer to them as.
We have like 6 or 7 items that we think are critical for you to have as much success as possible. We always like to tell people, going into divorce, you need to prepare for some heartache. All right, it's not an emotionally free activity. There are going to be periods of time when you're going to get hot, bothered, maybe angry,
depressed,
anxious, all the above.
Yeah.
So, and it's not a win-lose. It's a lose-lose. You have to go in with that attitude and not feel like, well, I've hired this attorney and I'm going to take that son of a bitch for everything. That's not the way to go into this. You're going to find out that that's furthest from the truth. Both of you are going to have to negotiate. So let's talk about it. Evaluate your strengths and your vulnerabilities, I think, is important right off the bat. Your strengths being, are you the financial person in the relationship? Do you take care of the bills? Do you know where all the assets are? Are you good at budgeting? Are you running a business? Are you good at bringing in the money? What are your strengths? And then your vulnerabilities are things that you might need help with. Mm-hmm. So maybe you don't know much about the financial end, or you really are anxious about your financial future. You don't understand all the nuances there. Maybe you don't have any real way to support yourself. You don't have a lot of training or skills in the workforce that can allow you to go out to work and get a good job. But sometimes that's required, unfortunately, because if you're a capable person, and especially if you had a degree in anything,
or you're younger,
have a lot of time on your hands, then a judge may look at it and say, look, you can go out and work. We don't need to just pay you to stay home. So those are the things we're talking about, strengths and vulnerabilities, and then we'll find the right people to help you with those vulnerabilities. Shaun and I are really good, and our firm is really good at helping people understand the complexities with the financial end, understanding where you're at. Now we're going to divide these. What are the scenarios? What are you going to end up with? And then how is that going to get you towards your long-term goals? Mm-hmm. What do you need to do to adjust this investment strategy, your contribution strategies, potentially remarriage along the way, dividing expenses, adding new layers of expenses, and where you're going to be going forward. So we want to make sure that you hire the professionals who are going to be needed, number one, as you're thinking about it. And then second, we'll jump into that. We're going to inventory assets and liabilities.
That's likely the first thing an attorney or we're going to require as CDFAs are, what's going on? What are the assets? What are the liabilities? Are there 401k plans out there? Are there properties, homes, businesses is a big one. The forgotten one, pension. Is there a pension out there, and how we're going to value that? And then what do you owe on these potential assets? Does the home have a loan? Does the 401k have a loan? Is the business leverage? And these may be overwhelming questions. And some people say, oh my God, I've never been involved in the finances. I'm not sure what is out there. And I think that's a great time to start engaging with a CDFA. Because a CDFA is not a forensic. They're not diving in and looking for all these crazy things, but a CDFA could look at a tax return and say, oh, I see we got a 1099 from Edward Jones or Northwestern or Raymond James, whatever it is. That means there's an investment account there. Or I see we have a 1099-R. It looks like some money was rolled over. Where did that end up? So we start uncovering all these things that you may not think about if you weren't heavily involved in the finances. And if you're not involved at some extent with you and your partner and your finances, I'd get involved. I'd be attending the tax meetings. I'd be meeting with the financial advisor. I'd know what bank accounts and start kind of preparing, I guess, if you're in that stage to, if you know this is coming down the pike, a potential divorce, and start readying yourself a little bit more.
That's what I think is important. If the conversation actually hasn't reached the point of, hey, we're getting divorced, and you're just kind of hey, I'm unhappy. I don't think I can stay in this relationship any longer. Mm-hmm. Okay, if that's where you're at mentally, then you better start preparing for this step after, which is what are you going to do? And inventorying the assets, finding out the bank statements, the investment statements, retirement accounts. So you may not have access to your spouse's 401k plan at work, but you might know where they keep the statements. You might be able to ask questions. You also should attend the meetings, as Shaun mentioned, the accounting. If you have an accountant outside, don't just allow your spouse, who may have been handling that for all these years, to handle all that.
Signing your name on a tax document.
Yeah, we've seen it. Unfortunately, we've seen it. But get involved in the meeting so you know where everything is, all right? You know where things are, because that way you will have kind of that negotiating power, and you won't be able to be manipulated as easily or have assets hidden from you. Now, we can find a lot of things that most people don't know how to find just by looking at things like those tax returns or uncovering assets that might be held elsewhere. And we find that in different ways. Okay, there's a financial declaration that you'll need to both prepare as you go into either mediation or even a contested divorce or whatever route you're going to take. But this financial declaration will ask list of all assets. One area that people like to, I'd say, manipulate value is it a business and a business interest. Now, we see that all the time. Someone, let's say husband and wife even, or maybe oftentimes it's a husband who's dealing with the business day in and day out, knows the business very well. Wife might not know much about it, just knows, hey, we've owned this business and it's paying our bills. It's been great, but they don't know what it's worth. And that's where we start seeing a lot of valuation discrepancy.
Yeah. I mean, with your business owner, a lot of times they'll claim, well, if I'm not here, the business is worth zero. And that's a big, big question mark there. Or it's worth nothing. It's got debt, there's no assets, but there's been revenue sources for the last how many years. And judge will look at that and say, that's likely to continue. So having an idea, and even some of these, you might just list it in your declaration and you may not know what it's worth. Put a question mark by it. It's just so you know to inquire about it when we're going down the road of divorce.
Sometimes people get highfalutin ideas, like crazy valuation, what they assume something's worth. So we've seen it on both ends, the extremes. Oh, yeah. I would say we can help you put a value on that just by understanding a lot of the inner workings of the business, whether maybe the revenues, the taxes that are being paid, number of employees, the products, the inventories. So the accounts receivable and payable.
Industry that it's in.
Their buildings that they own. The industry. So there's a lot of different metrics that we use to help put a value on a business. And then we'll look at similar businesses and maybe business sales that have occurred in that industry to help us come up with a final determination. And a judge likes to use experts like us in navigating that, because the judge doesn't know either. And attorneys, judges, they don't know this stuff. So we're able to help get those valuations.
One thing before you jump forward, just while we're on assets, if you've received an inheritance or thinking you might receive an inheritance, this is a big one. I would advise, even if you're happily married, everything's blue sky, to keep those inherited assets in your own name. Once you joint that, put it in a joint titling, or commingle it is the term, that's on the table if you guys get divorced. If it's in your own name, typically off the table. That is your own inheritance. You don't have to worry about dividing that. But, as baby boomers are getting older, we're seeing lots and lots of money in motion in the form of inheritances, and we're often recommending, hey, that stays separate.
And we're going to talk about that a little further in one of these case studies. But it's called separate property versus marital property. And the separate property comes from things like inheritances or money that you had prior to the marriage, assets like that. And sometimes pensions can be, or portions of pensions can be considered separate property.
Right.
It's interesting to see the dilemmas that come up and the animosity, because somebody received an asset and said, that was mine. Mom gave me that. Well, you put it into a joint account, or you bought a home now and the home is owned in a joint name, or you put it into a business. So as soon as that happened, what the law says is that you assumed that asset was now part of your marital property. So therefore, the ex or the spouse can take a claim on it. So Shaun's just giving you some good advice right there on keeping things in a separate account. Now that may right then itself create some animosity within your relationship.
Red flag.
You're not going to touch that money. That's mine. But we've seen it happen a lot.
Well, I'm saying it's a red flag if it pisses your spouse off.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you might want to consider that. Or even, we didn't talk much about like prenups, but if you're worth a lot of money and you're getting married and you're like, hey, I'd like you to sign a prenup, and they're like refusing it, might be a red flag. So consider that. And I would definitely want a prenup if you're in a high net worth situation.
Especially if you're a sugar daddy out there, you're listening to this, or a sugar mama. That's becoming more and more common these days.
No kidding.
So make sure you're looking at the property tax notices, the valuations on different properties, businesses, pieces of real estate. Pensions are big. We want to make sure you don't miss a pension, because a lot of times those kind of float under the radar and people don't pick up on them. And that's a big asset. It's actually a really, really big asset that people don't even know how to value.
And also nowadays, I mean, Bitcoin could be part of the equation, and we're not fans of it, but is that hidden in some wallet somewhere? Jewelry, another thing. I mean, we're talking about liquid assets. Now we're talking about like what jewelry is out there.
The Rolexes.
Guns, the Rolexes. I mean, that's part of the equation, the vehicles even. Yep. So it's everything when we're talking about assets and liabilities.
Don't go too far with the assets. We actually had a client that had an inventory, had like a 25-page spreadsheet, silverware, the utensils, the pancake flipper,
rugs in the front of the house. I mean, it was down to.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I don't think that you want to go into that level of craziness. Second or third thing though is ensure yourself a liquidity source. So we have worked with clients, unfortunately, who don't have a lot of control or involvement in the financial end, and they just kind of used to using a joint credit card or having money in their bank account that they can access. And then if they get a real contentious situation and their spouse has control of the assets, can just shut them down. Now, a judge is not going to like that. So it's going to backfire on that party. But in the meantime, the spouse that doesn't have access to the funds might be in a real difficult situation. They don't know, they can't even pay their bills. They can't go shopping. They can't go out to eat because they don't have, the credit card could have been canceled because it might be a joint card, canceled it. Lock out your name from the bank account, no cash. So we want to make sure people are starting to think about, like, do I need to get credit in my own name, establish a credit card, go in and talk to the people where you bank, see what you need to do there. Maybe you set up an individual account. Now, you don't want to do anything that could be considered shady and, stealing money, so to speak. But if you can justify that you needed $5,000, $10,000, whatever, this is what you needed for your lifestyle you've been living, have access to some money, because you're probably going to have to pay some professionals to get started on your divorce proceedings.
Don't run out there and try to spend it all. Guys, I'm talking to you. They think, I'll just spend it and it's gone. That's not going to look good.
Big mistake.
If
it goes to court or even mediation, they'll pull that out and say, look, my husband went out and bought a bunch of new equipment, a new truck, a new trailer, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're going to equalize that. They're going to say, well, if you just spent $40,000, we're going to equalize. Now the wife needs $40,000. So it's coming right back, and you just made a big mistake by thinking you needed that stuff, and now you don't have the money anymore.
Billy, I need a trip to Mexico. I'm stressed.
Well,
gotta go.
Decide. We're telling people when you start a divorce, really rein in the discretionary spending because you're going to need some money. All right. Divorce is expensive. And then the aftermath, it takes a while to get back on your feet. So don't just go out and start spending money willy nilly. We understand that you might need some therapists. You might need a spa, a massage. Yeah. Do things like that aren't going to break the bank to get through it from an emotional standpoint.
That leads into the next one, determining a budget. Yeah. We're talking about spending. This is key.
Very few people like budgets, do they?
No one likes a budget. No one keeps a budget.
It used to be when you were handling your finances and you had your bank account, you had your checkbook savings, your checkbook, passbook, whatever they call that. I forgot. But I actually saw a guy the other day at the grocery store who whipped out his checkbook.
Register.
Yeah, register. And he was writing every detail down about that transaction. And then not only that, Shaun, he budgeted it. He actually calculated, what he's got left.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
guy's probably worth a mint because he tracks every dollar.
It's a treasure. But yeah, what I'm saying is make sure that you know what your budget is from a standpoint of what do you need, not necessarily what you've spent last month. Use that as a template, but what you expect to need going forward. Because now you may be
post-divorce going forward, yeah.
You might be on your own. You may have to sign up for your own cell phone account, have your own utilities. You can't just split the things like garbage and sewer and water. Right. If you're going to be in a different household. You might have rent. You might have to take on your own
health insurance.
Health insurance,
huge.
Big one. Auto insurance. You might have to split that out. So sometimes where you get savings for being together, husband and wife, no longer apply. There's a lot of things that you need to consider. We have some really good resources here where we can provide you with these budget lists and help you so you don't miss things and list out all the different expenses that you're going to have. And even things like haircuts and gifts or Christmas or charitable giving or things that you don't think about. Your children, school or
activities,
extracurricular, sporting events.
The budget's a big deal, especially when you start looking if this is going to be a spousal support case, an alimony case. You've got to be able to justify it. So what we often see is husband does his budget, shows he doesn't make any money if he's the breadwinner. Wife does their budget, wants to show all these expenses, all these extravagant things because they're trying to make the case for alimony. And I get that while you're trying to do it. But you've got to sit down and be realistic because ultimately, if this goes all the way to court and a judge looks at it, he's going to spend or she's going to spend 15 minutes and chop it up and it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So if you guys can work together and say, this is a reasonable expense, we go on 2 vacations a year, or this is what it's going to cost to feed the 4 kids, like really sit down and go through that. And then you can see, the need for spousal support or the ability to pay on the payer side.
That's the other thing is that the 2 different components is the need and then the ability to pay. And that gets into a further conversation we'll have in another case study. But when one spouse has been staying home, and we mentioned it before, they have the ability to work, then the judge might do something called impute the income. So they're going to say, based on someone with your skills, with your education, you can get a job in this economy doing this.
Yeah.
Especially if you've worked, like, for example, let's say you've been an airline stewardess for 5 years, and then you stop to take care of your kids. Judge can say, no, hey, with your level of experience, you can get back on. You could be making $70,000 a year. This is the number of hours. Okay, so that's going to be something you're going to need to contend with because you can't just sit back and say, I'm going to go for spousal support, and that's going to be my lifestyle. He's not going to force your ex to take care of you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and keep in mind, spousal support ends 99% of the time if you cohabitate or get remarried.
Oftentimes it lasts for the length of the marriage. I've seen more times than not, I see that it's half the length of the marriage because it's kind of the trend that it's going toward, where a lot of people remarry these days. And, especially if you remarry, that's going to end. Sometimes people settle where we don't advise them to. They go outside of our realm of advice, and they end up locking themselves into alimony for life. And that's a tragedy for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
and it also is, I think, on the person that's receiving the alimony. Like, you're tied to this person for the rest of your life. You can't move on, with a new partner or anything. It's kind of stressful. So we advocate, like, hey, let's put something together so you're going to be okay moving forward. We're not going to
You're not relying on
We're not relying on it, or we know it's going to end at some point, this alimony payment. What's the plan after that?
Yeah. There's got to be a plan. And we want to help people move forward because it's a new chapter of your life. So you don't ever want to feel like I have to keep reliving life the way it was. You move on, and you're on your own, and you kind of figure things out as you go. But when you're talking about your budget, one other thing is consider your income. You can't be too sure of spousal support, so don't just assume that's going to happen. Sometimes it is not allowed; it's disallowed. But so you need to kind of think about, what's my income source? Is it from new career, or joining the workforce again, or maybe I'm on Social Security now, or maybe I have some rental. Maybe we're going to divide the assets to where you're going to receive a portion of the business income for a period of years. There are a lot of different ways to structure it if you know where to look. The next thing we're going to talk about, Shaun, is step 5 in the action items. Determine the best route for your divorce. A lot of different routes there you can take. We've seen it all.
Yeah, all of them.
We've seen people call us jointly. They just want to have us help them. So we call that kind of a minimalist approach, where they don't want to hire attorneys because they know that there's a lot of negative outcome if you go with the wrong attorneys.
Go into your separate corners. This is the scenario where husband and wife are still talking, getting along. There's no trust issues. Everything's on the table, and they're like, we just don't understand the finances. Can you help us come up with an equitable settlement?
Solution.
Yeah. And we can do that through this software that we use, and then they get the reports and they file their own divorce.
And we can go back and forth. We can change things. It's so dynamic with the way we handle this in our approach to showing not only the division today, but the projected division or projected growth of those assets, and how they're going to grow for each party.
Right.
So that is something I think is very unique to what we do. Very few people understand that. They just look at today's division as they were done. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize that certain assets are going to grow way faster than others, especially like a marital home. Not going to grow near as fast as a 401k or stock or a business.
Right.
The next approach to divorce is going to be more like the go it alone. You don't want to hire anybody, and we've seen that too. People will call us and just say, how do I do this? I don't want to pay anybody anything. Well, good luck, bud, because, you get what you pay for most times.
Yeah. Go do your own knee surgery.
Yeah.
See how it turns out. Or we've had those cases come in and they're like, hey, we did this years ago. We think we screwed it up. Can you fix it?
Fix it now.
And it's more costly than if you would have just hired the right people in the first place.
Some people are so tight, especially like, I don't mind it if it's people that really don't have a lot to divide anyway, and they're just trying to, I understand that totally.
Yeah, just trying to get it done.
There are ways to do that. Just, do it online. But if you are someone with substantial assets and you're too tight to pay for professional help, I don't really believe in that at all. I think that's just
makes zero sense.
Silly way.
It's almost like you don't value your assets enough to worry about paying someone some money
or how you're going to do it. So that's just a go it alone route. I would only recommend that for people that don't have much to divide in the first place. And then you go with the mediated route, which is oftentimes, all right, well, the parties are probably going to have a little difficulty in overcoming certain issues. Like maybe it's child support, like custody arrangements. Maybe it's, we don't agree necessarily with who's going to get the house, but still they don't really want to hire attorneys. And they might just want to say, look, we're going to hire a mediator to try to negotiate, try to be the middle road and somebody that we can bounce ideas off of who's not going to take sides. Oftentimes, Shaun or myself or our firm is hired to represent people in that capacity because, again, we're neutral. We're just helping people see the big picture. We've had a lot of mediators who've provided rave reviews for our work because we help people open up and see what's behind the curtain, not only the assets, but the after-tax consequences of each of those assets. And that's a one that I think is, again, less expensive, but you have to be open to negotiation and communication.
Right.
The fourth one is the collaborative approach. I think if it were me and I was recommending something to my best friend or, a family member, I would strongly encourage them to try to do the collaborative approach to divorce. It's been around for a while, but it's unique in that everyone is communicating together. Matter of fact, it goes against the whole process if anyone tries to talk to one another, to their legal experts behind their back, or tries to negotiate something without the other parties involved. So
it's just like it sounds. It's collaborative.
Exactly.
All working together.
Everyone's in the same room whenever you meet, or maybe on a Zoom call, but each party has their own attorney, and the attorneys have to be trained in this collaborative approach. So they are not interested in fighting and taking this process out as long as possible. And I will say there are some attorneys who are like that. Why? Money. Think about it. They're paid by the hour. The longer they drag it out, the more money they make. The more they promise you, the more they tell you you're getting screwed, the more you're going to want to fight, dig in your heels, and stay in that boxing ring. So the collaborative approach where everyone has to say, look, we're willing to negotiate this. I'm trying to represent my client on this issue. And then they hire a financial expert because they understand the real need and the importance of a financial expert. And we're called financial neutrals in that scenario, where anyone can propose a scenario. We can show them the outcome of that scenario, if it works, if it doesn't work, where the trade-offs would be, and then maybe suggest alternatives. Let's use this asset to be the trading asset, or let's kind of do a mix match of what you're proposing over here. Also bring to light things that may be not necessarily factual.
Yeah.
So sometimes people try to slide something in that the other party wouldn't know. And we're required ethically to bring that to light. Sometimes that makes people mad, but look, we're representing everyone here in the best interest, not just one party.
And I think it's powerful because we've talked about this all the time. Like, has anyone ever gotten a text or an email and it may just say something, but you take it the wrong way? There's no context and you're like, well, they're kind of being a jerk, or why are they asking me this? So think about that in a divorce. It's highly emotional. Everyone's worried about getting screwed over. And now you get a document that says, I want the house, half the 401k, 100% custody of the kids. And you're reading this and you're like, what the hell is his problem or her problem? In a collaborative approach, we're in the room. So the person might say, I think it makes sense for me to get X, Y, Z, and here's why. And then the other person's like, okay, I can kind of understand that. I can read your tone, can read your body language, versus communicating through all these legal documents. And we've seen that be very powerful. Yeah, you can still get heated, you can still get mad, but at least you're voicing yourself and you're being heard rather than communicating through attorneys. And the other big thing with collaborative, I think this is the kind of the main point of it, is if you can't come to a resolution, you can't agree, and you end up going a different route to court or to mediation or whatever, you got to fire all the experts. You got to start over from scratch. Wasted time, wasted money. The collaborative, even though there's more experts involved, it's often the cheaper route because it gets done in a timely manner.
The reason why they make you start over is because the collaborative attorneys agree in their contract up front that should one party want to contest it and go to that route where it's maybe a judge is involved, they can no longer represent you.
It's done.
Because they're working in good faith to get you a negotiation. In other words, if they were going to be wearing both hats, then there'd be no incentive to settle in this collaborative setting.
Right.
They'd go through all that, make all that money, and then say, nah, let's just go to court.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is about, guys. This is about trying to reach a settlement that you can both live with. And you can both maybe disagree, but somehow meet in the middle somewhere that allows you, especially if you have kids, oh my God, especially if you have kids, you're going to have to deal with that person probably for the rest of your life. And so why not have some sort of a working relationship? This is a tough one, and I've even lived this myself. If I'd have known about collaborative when I got my divorce, that's how I would have done it. I didn't even know that existed back then. And it was really a challenge because you both think that you have to have representation, and you both think that you're mad. And just like Shaun said, I got those letters in the mail, and they were from the other attorney, and they paint you as the biggest jerk, as the world's worst person. You did this, you did that. They're
building all this up,
letter after letter, and so the anger kind of just accumulates to a point where you're coming out fighting. You're ready to fight no matter what, and you're going to fight. And the worst part about that fight is the kids take the worst of it. So they're the ones that are the pawns in the whole game of, we'll call it whatever it is. It's just a silly negotiating tactic. And no one knows it unless they've lived it, of how that impacts the kids. So I really urge people, whenever we're dealing with them, and if you're listening to this, take a step back from your anger and from the ego that wants to take over and prove a point or get even. Take a step back and imagine yourself as one of your children. And how would you feel if that were your mom and dad handling things? What would you do? How would you handle that? How would you feel? I really encourage you to, go take the high route. Shaun and I were talking the other day, and I mentioned it's really interesting how people can change their tone if they just offer something up. Right. And instead of trying to fight, you start off fighting, you're going to get met with a fight, resistance, right? Like equals like. So if you start off with an encouraging word or a nice thought or a gesture, you're most likely going to be met with that same response.
I'm laughing. Do you remember the movie Wedding Crashers?
Oh yeah.
The opening scenes, Vince Vaughn and the other dude, they're mediators, right? And they're in this divorce mediation. They're all in the same room, and she's calling him a son of a bitch, and he's telling her what a worthless person she is, and then she needs to take a anxiety med or something, and the husband goes, "Will you get her a glass of water?" And she's like, "Thanks, honey." And then it was, "You know what, honey? You take the credit card, Miles." So he offered up like that caringness, and then the whole mood changed, and then they got it done.
I've seen it happen so many times in these settlements. It's crazy. It's just, but it's weird. If sometimes it's unintentional. Somebody just, it's like a subconscious reaction that, why don't you've been with the kids more, you take more of that time. And then you're met with the reciprocity of, you know what, you have that, you wanted that.
Yeah.
Think about it when you're going in to negotiate. I can't tell you enough. It's not a situation where you want to come out with your sword. You don't win by force.
No.
The last one is, again, the contested. And that's, I think, the worst. Now, we've been involved in some, because sometimes you just find that angry person, bitter, resentful, who just will not come to see the light of day. They will not see the other person's perspective. And sometimes we just have to step up and say, no, we're not going to give that much.
Yeah. That
doesn't make any sense financially. And it might be a separate property issue. It might be who gets the home. It might be something like that. Now, we usually deal with those things in a negotiated manner. Most times people have a little bit of a challenge with the home. We try to find ways through that, all right? We try to talk people off the ledge. But when someone just won't budge, and they're not willing to give 1 inch, go forward. You're going to fight. You're going to end up costing yourself a lot of money. We'll talk about another one.
We try to avoid those, believe me. We try to screen those out. It's not worth the time and energy and the stress of it. But
nobody wins there.
But we've been involved in a few, and the resolutions that sometimes came 2 or 3 years later wasn't far off from the original proposal that we went with. But let's bust through these last, we got 3 more? No, 2 more. 2 more.
The last couple, one is just to negotiate that settlement that equalizes everything, the assets, the income, and then considers the growth. And I kind of touched on that a minute ago. So how you negotiate that is important. Do you have experts helping you? Do you have somebody just writing it down on a napkin or a yellow pad? We've actually been in mediations where the mediating professional is writing it down on a yellow pad and just handing, here's this,
Can't even read it.
Our approach is digital and it's viewable. It's very, very dynamic. So people can look at our computer screens, or we can project them on the screen in the office and show the different scenarios and quickly change those. Just on the fly, make adjustments based on what people want to see or how to change certain divisions, and then immediately calculate the results of what that would do to both parties. Not only that, but show visual graphics of the growth of those assets over a 10-year period and the income levels for both parties over a 10-year period. Very powerful when you're in a negotiating room.
For sure.
Last?
Yeah. Post-divorce, financial and emotional support. So everything's done. The dust is settled. It's time to start planning for your own future. Okay. It's updating maybe trust documents. It's retitling assets. It's getting divisions done. It's now planning, okay, what's this going to look like for me? And yeah, we've done the projections through the divorce process, but now you're getting into the nitty gritty and it's your own financial plan going forward. It also might be there's some emotional scars with yourself or with your kids. And does therapy make sense? Talking to someone through all this to make sure that you're headstrong too, because you'll be making some decisions that are coming up. So, it's a new life for you. I've seen people most of the time, they're super happy after everything is done, and they feel like they got a good shake on the settlement. And
takes a little time to get to that level,
for sure.
That emotional level where you feel like you're okay. Most people go through these stages of divorce, and there's a lot of different emotions there.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to that stage where you realize you're okay, and some people get there quicker, and I think you get there quicker if you have the support system and you have the professionals helping you along the way. But then we kind of recommend, hey, what is your life? What do you want your life to be? Because now you get a redo. You kind of get to start over. Do you want to be something different? Do you want to join some groups or have activities or pursue new things, experiences? And again, making it fit within your budget. We're not just saying run out there and start going crazy. You have to have a plan, and a plan is important. And I would say most women are more adept at that. They're more open to that. Yes, they want to know where they're going. They want to have a feeling of security and stabilization after this divorce. So we find more times than not, divorcing clients, the woman will come and
engage with us with the financial planning.
Yeah, so it's a big part of it, knowing where you're going, because you're going to spend a long period of time, most likely, in this new realm, and maybe you'll get remarried and all that stuff. So that's great, but we always want to make sure you're on the right track to start all this new stuff. So a financial plan, make sure you don't miss the therapist part. They're important for you to navigate, and your kids too. Don't forget about them. Couple quick case studies that we want to end with and just kind of show you maybe the good, bad, and the ugly with divorces. We've seen so many. It's one of my biggest pet peeves is to see people dig their heels and especially use their kids and not consider their feelings in these processes. But sometimes we find things that are absolutely crazy. And one in particular was a few years ago, and we were contacted by a lady, an attorney who we'd worked with, and he was representing this lady. And they were actually kind of on the elderly side. I mean, they weren't super old, but I think 70-ish, early 70s, and when they were going to get divorced.
Crazy.
So we're thinking, man, that's a late, age to get divorced. You just finally figured out you don't like each other. But come to find out, after speaking with her, the husband was like a miser. He was a Scrooge, like a real world Scrooge that wouldn't spend hardly a nickel and was worth millions and millions of dollars. We found out.
Yeah, no one knew that.
No one
was
knew
worth millions.
No, I mean, it's kind of stereotypical person that walks around in their old beat up sweater, looked like a homeless guy, and had millions of dollars behind him because he wouldn't spend a nickel. Matter of fact, he'd go to Taco Bell,
Taco
Del
Tuesday.
Taco.
Yeah,
Taco Tuesday or something for $1 tacos. That was his every week.
Wouldn't use his own water at his house, so he'd shower at like the local university. Gym.
Wouldn't allow his wife to turn on the heat during the winter. Had to, wrap up in 4 or 5 Afghans.
Yeah, or he turned on the stove, I think. For some reason, he thought that was cheaper to heat the house. Like, seriously, like down to just the penny, and so restrictive on her. And I think that's what forced her to file.
She was finally wanting to enjoy her life because she knew she was up there in age, had grandkids, and wanted to start giving them money. And the guy was just so worried about every penny. anyway, we start getting the statements. We start getting copies of the documents, and we start digging in and thinking, wow, this is interesting. Wow, this is crazy. And we're looking further and further. And we find out that he is thinks he's a big investor. You know, he'd been a pilot for many years, and he would accumulated a lot of money in that endeavor. Obviously, when you don't spend anything, you can build up quite a bit. But his investment advisor had them invested in some of the worst possible asset classes, things you could do, putting them in these limited partnerships and things that took huge commissions up front, zero liquidity, couldn't get their money out.
Very high risk for their age.
Split it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely impossible to split in a divorce because there's no way to even split the ownership of these things. So it was nasty. And what we ended up helping them negotiate was, all right, your husband's going to take all of those limited partnerships, all the so-called sophisticated investments that are supposed to be so valuable, and we're going to take all the retirement assets and the liquid stuff for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she needed it for the income. And it ended up being a really, really good settlement for her because she hired us. And we were able to figure out how to negotiate. The husband didn't have an inkling of knowing that he needed a financial expert. He relied on his investment advisor who had screwed him on the investments in the first place, relied on him in his divorce negotiation, didn't understand any of how to divide it. It was a terrible settlement for him. Absolutely terrible. If we would have represented them both, it would have been a different recommendation for us because we have to represent them both equally. However, she hired us. And so when a certain single party hires us, we can negotiate for them and get the best settlement for them. All the while not doing anything unethical or illegal, just saying, we want these assets, you keep these. On paper,
and he wanted those. In his mind, those were the most valuable things that they had.
I don't know if he ever got his money out of that, but I think the poor guy passed away not long ago.
Yeah.
His kids didn't know, they grew up without anything. They didn't know what was going on there. And they were so happy when we got involved and helped the mom find these assets. They called it found the assets because they didn't know anything about them. They didn't know Dad was worth millions of dollars. And we're talking like maybe $10 million. It was insane. That was one of them.
That was one.
Shaun, hit on the next one.
Well, I'm thinking about, this contentiousness of these people that are upset in a divorce. And no one's happy when this happens. Very rarely are people like, hey, I can't wait to get divorced. This is exciting. But we were involved in a case where, and I think it was mostly you, Billy, but you went to a mediation with them and the husband had engaged with us.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And it was the point where they asked you, the opposing counsel, will you come talk to our client? Mm-hmm. Which was the wife for them. You go into the other room and map out like, hey, this is why this is an equal settlement. You showed everything and the attorneys agreed, everybody. She was not going to budge on it. She was so mad, so spiteful. I don't even know if it was infidelity. I don't know what the hell it was.
Well, I don't know either. I know that she sat there and looked at me and just sat there staring at me the whole time. I don't think she said two words as I was showing her and her attorney in the private room, here's the best scenario. And I was being forthcoming with information. Yeah. Here's what the best scenario is.
Yeah. Our client gave us permission. Just put it on the table.
This is what it's going to look like. You're going to be well off. You're going to be fine. Your income's going to be taken care of. This is the approach that makes sense for you. Didn't want to even talk to me.
Right. I think the issue was there was a retirement account that had some premarital property. He had money in a retirement account that was his. And then they got
that was partly separate.
That was separate. And it wasn't, given the size of their estate, it wasn't a huge portion of it. She did not budge on that. And this case, we were involved 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. And the other one was part of that case was the home, which he purchased before their marriage. Yeah. See, he was married prior to, and then he got married to her, and she was like 15 years younger than him. So it was one of those, he was a pilot, and she was a stewardess, and who knows what kind of weekend they had, but we don't know. But anyway, it was his home originally, and she wanted the home. And he was saying, I want to keep the home. I bought this home. You came into this after the marriage. And she's like, nope, that's my home. So it got really ugly. And she's one of those kind that did not want to negotiate, did not want to budge. She was, I think, fed incorrect information. Mm-hmm. And she felt like she was entitled to whatever she wanted. And she was going to annihilate him. So it went all the way to court, and this was during COVID, and we had to do
Zoom expert witness, everything.
I was an expert witness on the Zoom call with the judge, and I was at that point, I was struck by how uneducated the judge was on financial matters.
Yeah.
I had to completely educate her on everything. Like what a 401k is? How does an IRA work? How can you divide these things? Can you not? Should they be considered separate property?
That was a big thing. I mean, that was the big hang up on the case. And this was the one I mentioned earlier where the proposed sitting in that mediation 3 years earlier versus what the judge ended up deciding was not that far off.
Yeah.
But we're talking years later, emotional distress, $100,000 plus in legal bills, I think each. So I think it was a couple $100,000. I think
so, yeah.
And so that means they all ended up with less overall. And just because her heels were so dug in on it.
Worst part was they had 2 young boys. Like they're not young, but in their teens. Mm-hmm. And they saw mom and dad going, this was a bad thing for them.
Yeah.
To have to get drugged through that and just try to act like it's okay and they're fine. And
keep in mind, when we're telling people don't be contentious, we're not saying roll over and just take any offer that comes your way. We're just saying know that there's things you've got to negotiate on and what you'll give up on. And yeah, there's the non-negotiables, but you've got to just think, how much am I paying Peter or Utah Divorce Planning? How much am I paying my attorney? How much is this taking out of my time of my day? And is it worth it? I just want to scream, is this worth it?
There's a line in Casey's Shadow I always use. Is it worth it to you? So that's what I say all the time is add up the trade-off, the pros and cons. The next one is one more client that we worked with, and this is kind of a tricky situation. Whenever someone has a pension plan, we are always looking at that very carefully because a pension is one of those assets that kind of slips in as it is underrated, so to speak. They don't know how valuable it really is. But let's say, for example, you have somebody that worked for the government or like a university, for example, or a company that was offering a pension plan. They're very uncommon these days, but still pretty common with universities.
Sure.
Let's say the pension was going to pay like $6,000 a month at retirement age. So let's say at age 65, person's going to get $6,000, and we're going to keep raising that the longer you stay. So that's just kind of what's earned so far, that you've been there for 25 years, and if you stayed 35 years, now it's going to be $8,000 or whatever.
Whatever, yeah, increasing.
So it's increasing. So people that don't understand pensions, they're just going to look at that as, well, that's an income stream, and he's only 50, so we won't even worry about that. It's going to be there when he's 65. Huge mistake, because we're going to look at that and value that as an asset, not as an income stream. We're going to take that income stream and we're going to bring it back to today's value. So it's called the net present value. So we're say $6,000 a month for that many years. You can expect it to live to be 91.
Cost of living adjustments.
And we're going to say, that thing's worth about $950,000. What? Are you kidding me? No, that's true. I mean, it could be even more than that based on the age and some other factors like the discount rate, which we won't get into today. But there are a lot of different ways that are considerations that need to be met when you're valuing a pension. It oftentimes is one of the largest, if not the largest, asset in a divorce.
Very true.
Especially if it's like, hey, you're going to get $10,000 to $12,000 a month. Man, if that's going to be paying out for 40 years, that is a huge value, because the net present value, in other words, what would it take in a retirement account to produce that for you? And that's what we look at it. How much would it take in a lump sum to produce that kind of an income for 40 years?
And then we're looking at the other assets, like how are we going to, if we're dividing the pension or if one person's keeping the pension, how are we buying the other person out of their 50%?
Could be a trade-off.
Could be a trade-off.
Could be a division.
Could be a division. And if you're dividing pensions, there's a shared interest and there's a separate interest. And write that down, because a shared interest says, okay, I'm getting part of the pension, but if the person that earned the pension dies, bye-bye.
Gone.
That income stream stops. A separate interest means that's mine. That they carved it out. That is separate. That is my portion of that pension. And it's not reliant on if this person's still alive over here that earned the pension.
Have an attorney that knows what they're doing when you're talking about pensions. they all have to be divided through what's called the quadro. It's a legal document that has to be submitted to the pension plan provider and has to be agreed upon and accepted. There's different language, and it gets kind of tricky. I don't know. Sure. That's one of those weird areas it's not clean. There's a lot of different ways to look at pensions.
I know we're running on time, but not to mention there could be separate property or separate interests. I don't want to confuse people, but they earned part of that pension prior to marriage.
Yes.
So that could be another one of those separate property.
We look at that in different formulas. In Utah, they call that the Woodward formula, how you're going to divide that, the separate versus the marital piece of it. Again, experts need to be involved in that. One other one, and we're going to shut this down here, but thanks for staying with us, by the way. A case where we had a real ugly scenario where you have both parties who have decent amount of money. One was actually making good money. The other one already had a lot of money. That was the husband. And he'd kind of using her for her services for what he provided in his business, so to speak. And they were getting divorced. It was not a good relationship. They weren't communicating well, but she hired an incompetent attorney who was terrible represented, told her everything she was going to get, promised her the moon, and we ended up in a mediation. She hired me to go down there and represent her. I laid out all the different scenarios based on their financial assets and what was equitable for her and what would have been appropriate. And in the mediation, we got kind of in a stall mode, so we were kind of waiting on the other parties for about half hour, 30, 45 minutes. Her attorney gets up and leaves, just leaves the room, didn't say anything, doesn't come back. So when the mediator came back into the room, the attorney's gone. And I'm like, where's this? So we're calling him. Well, he's took off for the day. His secretary doesn't know where he's at.
Oh my God.
Make sure who you hire. You're not hiring them just because of what they promise you, and they're just going to go get them. You want to hire somebody that has credibility, that's been there, done that, and that isn't in the mindset of fight. They want to be in the mindset of, we're going to help you get there with an equitable settlement, okay, that's going to allow you to move on. Yeah. That's what you're looking for.
Google reviews. I think they're powerful. Before I buy anything, engage with anybody, I look at the Google reviews, talk to the other clients, ask them about their caseload, like, can you even handle this? And make sure you mesh personality-wise. You're going to be spending a lot of time with this person. Absolutely. Talking about your own situation.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like to spill their guts when they go meet with an attorney and the emotions and how terrible their husband or wife is and how they've been screwed. And, the big term with the wives these days is narcissistic. My husband is a narcissist. Okay, we get that. But what we want to do is strip out the emotions, because that's not going to help you get to a settlement. Say, you can cry all you want, but you're getting a bill for that. You're going to be charged for all the time that you're going to spend gushing to your attorney. I would recommend you gush and you worry and you spill your guts to your therapist, not to your attorney. What you want to do with your attorney is come in there prepared to discuss your situation from a standpoint of high level. Here's what I think. Here's what's going on. Here's what we have. How are we going to get this settled?
Yep.
So thank you very much today for joining this second episode of divorce planning and all the ramifications that go along with it. I know that we've covered a lot of ground here, but this is not a cut and dried scenario or process, and most people don't know who to turn to. So we really highly recommend you find some experts that have been through it and that have shown the ability to help people navigate the complexities and help them with the best settlement possible. Not just go do something to fight, but actually help you with the process afterward, and to try to somehow stay in working terms with your ex. Because I think if you can get through the emotional anger and frustration and resentment, if you can get beyond that, you're going to have a much better experience and a life afterward. Thanks for tuning in today. You guys take care out there.
Thank you for listening. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Peterson Wealth Services is a registered investment advisor. This is a paid-for advertisement. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up-to-date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of a personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Peterson Wealth Services.